when possible, evacuates people. He's seen the sentiment that even though the situation is becoming more dangerous in the eastern area, and Avdiivka is kind of further into eastern Ukraine, some people still choose not to leave. And for example, if they have older parents that cannot move, or they have like their animals, especially in like more rural areas of Ukraine. So it's been a difficult uphill battle to bring people to safety. I know that Alex, who we've funded in the first round, he's joining Vlad right now, and he will contribute to his efforts to an extent. Evacuate Kharkiv. They've been evacuating people actively. The situation in Kharkiv is becoming more serious. I think there's more attacks, especially given that it's closer to the 9th of May. I'm not sure how much you're familiar with the Soviet history and the World War II history, but the 9th of May is kind of a significant date for the Soviet Union, because this is the date that they claim they won the Nazis and they won the World War II. And as you know, one line of propaganda is that Russians are going into Ukraine to denazify Ukraine, which is very ridiculous. And they're in their media, they've been actively saying that they're trying to achieve a lot of wins by 9th of May. That have been relatively quieter, like Western Ukraine, and it's likely that fighting will intensify and bombings will intensify in the eastern Ukraine, where now most of the combat activity is happening. So I just hope that the volunteers that we've been supporting will survive, and that they can continue to do the selfless good they've been working on for the past months. From our side, we will continue to support them through funding. Both the projects that we've supported so far, we'll consider them for refunding, and as well as other projects specifically focused on evacuation of civilians from combat zones. Let me know if anyone has questions about specifically the fundraisers that we've supported. Or if you have any questions about the events happening in Ukraine.
Gonna jump in and say, did you hear about the statement Russia put out? I want to say this morning about Nazi collaboration. It's pretty bonkers. It's definitely out there. It was crazy, absolutely crazy.
I haven't. What was the statement about?
It was a response to Israel because they're having a diplomatic tiff right now, and they were basically suggesting that Israel helping or supporting Ukraine is just as Ukrainian Jewish Nazi collaborators who supported the Holocaust against their fellow Jews, to try to make this comparison, which is really wild.
Yeah. I haven't heard about the statement itself. I just saw the memes about Israel stepping up their support to Ukraine. And I guess that was in the response to the claims that Russia made. I'm trying to bring up Adel Hussein. I'm having troubles with inviting her to speak. Can anyone else try? Maybe Obstacker?
Yeah. Looks like they've been invited. Adele, if you look on the bottom of your screen, there should be somewhere where you can accept that invite and become a speaker. There you go.
Perfect.
Oh, hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Hey guys, so really interested in this project y'all are working on. I'm with Spirit of America, so as last week y'all were talking with Mitch and Jim. But yeah, I think two things I wanted to talk about. First, in like the geopolitical sense, how do y'all feel about potential spillover from Transnistria? I think one of Russia's southern command generals were talking about creating a land corridor from Odessa to Transnistria that connects Crimea with that area of southern Ukraine. And then the second portion is I was wondering if y'all could talk about some of the work that Spirit America has been doing with House of Bread. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on the second one, I'm not sure. I think Vlad here is the representative House of Bread, and he could speak a little bit more to that. From what I understand, Spirit of America was able to contribute to House of Bread volunteers with 30 bulletproof vests, I think, which is to help keep volunteers safe because they are actively evacuating people from eastern Ukraine, where a lot of combat activity is happening. As to your first question, definitely not a geopolitical expert here. I think something that I've heard, and again, it's just reading basic news, is that it'll be very difficult for Russia to achieve this because they don't have dominance yet over bigger cities like Odessa, and their position in the southern Ukraine is not solidified to say that there's any possibility, like any major possibility that this will happen. But this is just, not an expert and not 100% sources. Well, the sources are quite good, but yeah, cannot talk much to predictions.
Hello, this is Vlad. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, there was a question for House of Bread. If you guys can ask again, and I'll be able to respond.
Yeah, so I know my organization, Spirit of America, later this week is going to meet up with House of Bread and do an aid package. I know we talked a little bit about it last week, but I was hoping we could just reiterate what this sort of partnership is going to look like for everyone in the group.
Yeah, so we have drivers where this 30 vests and helmets are going to. They're going to drivers of vans. They're minivans. They're usually 15-seaters, sometimes 8-seaters. Depends where they're going into Ukraine, because some roads are really bad, so only small vans can make it in. They're evacuating people. So we're putting this on drivers and co-drivers. We did want to put it on people because what happens with our drivers, when they get a vest, they end up giving it to the small kids, and we keep telling them to keep it on. But anyways, the 30 vests that we're receiving, I believe, in a couple of days on the 6th, our representative will pick them up by the border. It's already through Signal. We're communicating. I'm part of that group, and right away it'll be distributed to the drivers, and we'll take pictures of the drivers who will receive them, their names, and report it into Signal, a group that was created, and we can also report it here as well if that will be needed.
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you so much. Our drivers, when they've heard about it, they were so happy. They were just like, obviously they started fighting for it. All of them, when we announced it that we were bringing 30 vests in, who gets it? So we're trying to prioritize it. Who goes into more dangerous areas? But it is definitely a big blessing for us.
Well, hopefully this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship between both organizations.
Thank you.
Amazing. I was curious. I don't know, Adel Hussein, how much you're familiar with like the day-to-day operations of Spirit of America in Ukraine, but I think last week when they're here, we've going, which from my understanding, like this is largely the kind of aid that your organization is providing. And I know you're relying on partners, proven partners in Ukraine to prioritize where the West are going. And there are some certain issues with corruption, not specific to like any of the organizations that you're working in, but in general that a lot of Ukrainian volunteers have been talking about. I was wondering if you are familiar with kind of the day-to-day operations. Has there been any things that you've tried to undertake to reduce the corruption in the supply chain and making sure that the vests are getting to the units that they're supposed to be getting to?
Yeah, good question. So to start off, I want to caveat that and say I am headquarters staff. I operate out of our main headquarters in the United States. I'm not part of the field team on the ground in Ukraine. So I do apologize. This is more of me relating information that they've given us back in the States. What I will say is we intend to work with the people who are currently on the ground. That is the main distributors of the aid that we're sending on. You know, we're not the type of organization that's just like, okay, well, you know, here's the shipment, and someone in the government's going to take care of where it needs to go. We at least try to make sure that, you know, it's the individual soldiers, whether it's Ukrainian armed forces or the territorial defense forces, that are picking up the equipment and taking it with them. And of course, you know, if you were to go on our website, our Twitter, you'll see photos of Ukrainian soldiers or reserve volunteers who are literally taking the helmets and the bulletproof vests from our trucks and putting it on themselves, and then going back to doing their training. So that's the intent of a lot of the aid that we distribute over to Ukraine. We try to do it at the most grassroots level as possible so that we can ensure that the individual soldier is getting what they need in order to continue the fight.
Yeah, I really like that idea. It's kind of brilliant to focus on the training centers. And I think there you can also prioritize by the areas of deployment. If those are just people who are joining the territorial defense in like central Ukraine versus people going to eastern zones where more fighting is happening. I don't know, maybe from your experience, because I think Spirit of America its efforts are not unique to Ukraine. You're also operating in other areas. Do you think there's anything that larger organizations could do to push for more transparency from their partners? And again, it is a difficult question because you don't want to ask for that like perfect accountability, because you realize that there are certain time constraints and resource constraints that work creates. But at the same time, you do want to make sure that as least corruption as possible is happening.
Yeah, good question. And honestly, I can't speak on behalf of the operations of other organizations. I know the mission that we do in Spirit America is very unique. I can't name of another organization or nonprofit in the United States that's so embedded with United States forces, enablers, and its allies. What I will say, you know, and our models repeated all across the world, we try to go find out where that friction point is, and we try to insert ourselves in that friction point so that we can have rapid aid and response to what our local U.S. forces need or what our local allies need. And so really, you know, I would say for whether or not you're part of a larger organization or you're looking at an organization to sponsor in terms of helping Ukraine or overseas, anywhere else overseas, go find an organization that is really showing that they're throwing themselves in that friction point. I think a lot of charities, you know, they have the right intentions in mind, but they just don't have the logistics to go throw themselves in the friction point. And that's where you see situations of, okay, we've got money in the United States that goes to this charity, and then the charity just pushes it to a larger organization or into like a bureaucracy, and then that's when the money gets muddled. You don't know where it's going. You don't know if someone's individually pocketing it. You know, you don't know if someone's skimming off the top of that money. At the end of the day, what we try to do to ensure our donors that there's full transparency, that aid is being sent to the place that it needs, is just having full documentation of our operations, and then just providing information on a weekly basis, whether it's through social media or webinars, to our stakeholders who are interested in our operations, so that they know that, hey, this aid's getting to the right place, and we are going to be fully open to tell you who's getting this aid.
Oh, that is super interesting. I wanted to ask another question, but please, you don't feel pressure to answer it. It's really just like a hypothetical discussion. And I don't want to put you on a spot too much, but I was curious, could you like give us an example, maybe like non-Ukraine related, where Spirit of America inserted themselves effectively and helped solve a friction point?
Yeah, sure. And our founder, Jim Hake, talked about this in one of his TED Talks, if you look it up on YouTube. But when the organization was founded in the early 2000s, the very first mission that we did was there was a group of Green Berets in Afghanistan and they had embedded themselves in a village that had been constantly harassed by the Taliban and Al Qaeda. And these Green Berets, they had taught the local villagers how to play baseball, and the villagers they ate it up. They loved the sport. But the issue was they didn't have enough equipment to go around. They didn't have enough bats. They didn't have enough mittens. And so that ended up being the first mission of Spirit of America. Our founder, Jim Hake, really was able to finance that project of getting bats and mittens, bases, and what have you. And as a result, that Afghan village was able to subsequently really put that trust into that Green Beret detachment. And what continued is that village shared information about where terrorists were hiding, where weapons caches were, all because they had built that relationship and they learned how to play, the game of baseball through American Special Operations. And so that's sort of a model we've tried to replicate in its intent wherever we've gone over the world. There's another project in West Africa where a lot of people don't understand that livestock is the center of lifestyle over there. And so if your animals are sick or if your animals aren't being taken care of, then you're not earning money. And then you're susceptible to being influenced by these radical terrorist groups that will recruit people who have no other opportunities in their life. So we did a project a couple years back where we helped provide veterinary support to these remote villages in West Africa. And as a result, the people were much more appreciative of the American forces in the region, but they also put faith and credit towards their own government. And they were less inclined to be under the influence of these terror groups. And so those small projects like that is what we really intend to do with our operations that are overseas, showing local population that America is an ally to them, and that we want to continue their own freedom, their democracy, and their right to choose however way they want to live their life as a as expanding that sort of spirit of America, as our name calls it.
Wow, that's super interesting. Thanks for sharing. And it is so freaking important. Wow. Because I think like a lot of these territories had, like, people in these territories had to go through things that probably local governments implicated America in. And so to many of them, I guess in Afghanistan, now maybe rightfully so, but people might not be happy about the US involvement, and sometimes and it's very weird for us who like became like such a big part of the Western world. It's weird to hear that some people might not resonate with values like democracy and freedoms and rights, and that for some people this is not like the highest of values. So this is a very fascinating integration. Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, what we'll say is that the only people who should have control over the future of Ukraine are the Ukrainian people. And that's our end state for our operations. This idea that the people of Ukraine are entitled to self-determination to determine what their future is going to be. And we're going to fight in order to give you all a fighting chance.
Yeah.
I want to say, if I can pitch in a little bit, thank you, Anna. I just want to say a big thank you for working with grassroots companies, and I really love what Anna's doing here. She's bringing a bunch of little guys into the light of like, hey, this is what they're doing. This is what they're doing. And to be honest, this is probably the biggest frustration with big organizations that I've had lately. And to hear Spirit of America to share the idea of working with the little guy on the ground is such a big deal, because for me, I still have a lot of questions to big organizations where millions of dollars went into them, and I don't see them getting to the people who are actually on the ground working and doing the work, and including soldiers that are fighting, which is a little bit surprising to me. My idea was like, man, what happened? Ukraine in such a spotlight. I was expecting every huge organization in the world lining up to do stuff for Ukraine, and after being there and everything, it's just not happening. It will probably eventually, but on the ground, we see a little bit different picture. So I just want to say thank you again for the philosophy of your company, even though it's big, but the way you guys work. So thank you again.
No problem.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, I would assume that over the years, the larger organizations that work internationally, they have been ingrained with local politics, not as in like local politics within the countries, but at national levels. So, regardless of how much we want to believe that they are this independent organizations that are only driven by the desire to maximize their impact and help people, there's probably definitely some level of politics that is affecting their activity, and it's cool to hear. And I think especially your point, Adele, is saying on um, kind of like respecting the right to self-determination and not carrying your nonprofit activity under the flag of the US being the best country in the world and having to have a continuous involvement in reconstruction and setting on their own governance systems and advising on development and all of that, and just saying that post-conflict peace setup should happen by the people of the country, through their own elected officials, through referendums. That is something that is super cool and not as prevalent, I guess, through other like organization that might push more of a um, Western politics onto Ukraine. Yeah, and sorry, just just to add, I'm not gonna go into like too much of a monologue, but looking at like the causes of war, one of the dominant narratives in Russia was that Ukrainian, other than they totally deny Ukrainian identity, which has been their politics for the past century at least, they are thinking that a lot of the efforts that are happening in Ukraine are a proxy for Western power fighting Russia. So, kind of having more of conversations on the international scale, saying that no, Ukraine is its own independent country, and while Western nations are helping, there's still this definite division of Ukraine as a sovereign nations taking actions and becoming its more of its own country is important. So the narratives like that Ukraine is a proxy for West are being countered. Cool. Just
Want to
any, yeah, go
yeah,
obstacle.
I want to chime in here for a sec, just to um, give just general thoughts. Adele, really appreciate you being here, and I'm thinking like this is evolving into a really cool forum for organizations like Spirit of America to meet other organizations, like Vlad's and other individuals. And I think that was kind of originally the purpose, but I think it's really starting to take form. And I'm wondering, like, thoughts on I guess mainly like two questions. I guess one is, um Adele, like, do you see like a value in that type of platform, and like where, maybe insights around, maybe where you see the value? And then I guess two is like, try we keep hearing that these large organizations are, potentially squandering money or not maybe making as much impact as they should, and kind of like, where's all this funding going? And wondering, like, does this um uh what we're doing here, does this maybe like, is there a way to incentivize those organizations to come in here and you know like start to maybe change that without like necessarily telling them that they're ugly, so to speak? I don't know, just general thoughts there.
I think I can answer probably both questions with just maybe one statement. Yeah, I think obviously, I think in the information environment, most people who are West or like even neutral leaning around the world have taken Ukrainian side based on just the non-biased fact that's been presented to them. I think the issue with that is there's so many people who want to help, right? And they're motivated to help, and whether it's they want to go throw money to Ukraine or they want to go be boots on the ground and come to Eastern Europe. The issue there is there's just no organization. And I've seen videos of like some of the refugee camps that are in Poland, and it's chaotic because you have everyone who wants to essentially be in charge and everyone who wants to lead the effort, but there's just no organization on how to go put the effort in one single direction. And so I think that's where we have a lot of redundancies and a lot of inefficiencies in this process. I think in terms of finding a solution that's really difficult to say. It's really going to only happen with a little bit of time. And, as NATO, the EU, and different partners kind of get their feet underneath them and coordinate operations a little bit better, I don't think we're going to see that at a larger level. In terms of getting these larger organizations to maybe invest in more decentralized platforms that are helping out smaller groups like PeaceDAO, I think the biggest obstacle really is people just don't have education and knowledge of what y'all are doing. Truth be told, before I joined this community, I didn't know too much about cryptocurrencies. I didn't even know anything about DAOs. But when I did a little bit more research about this group, along with my organization, it clicked for me, right? And so what's going to be the biggest challenge is really convincing the people at the C-suite board, right? The CFO, the CEO, the COO, that organizations like or PeaceDAO, Movement DAO, is worth listening to because they give us that rapid responsibility that we wouldn't normally get from a different group of people. But that's just my 2 cents with it. I think the bigger issue is that when it comes down to crypto, it's still very much a generational idea. I think it's still very difficult for maybe the older generation to wrap their head around it and say that this is something that has some utility in the future. Whereas those of us, who are in our mid-20s and close by or younger, we're kind of caught onto it because we understand these systems a little bit better. So that's only my 2 cents with it. And, by all means, I'm not a nonprofit mobilization expert. But I think overall, we just have to be a little bit more open towards these grassroots efforts as opposed to traditional ways that we've done fundraising and donations.
Yeah, I have a question, Adele. This is Vlad speaking from House of Bread. Basically, my challenge, I organized, I would say, high-level logistical system in Ukraine with warehouses, trucks, and I brought in so far 80 semi trucks of food to help Ukraine, including medicine and all this other stuff. But my challenge is to have conversations with big organizations because my capabilities to transfer, I could do up to 40 trucks a week to bring into Ukraine. Right now, people are going hungry. People are asking for food. And for me, it's either I don't have a name, I don't have the connections, don't have the ability to speak to Red Cross, to speak to these big organizations. What would be your advice? We have the logistics set up. We have algorithms written for the reporting. It gets to the people. There's everything in place. But every door I try to knock on, it feels like they have something on their own going on. But when I try to investigate how much they bring into Ukraine, it's also not a lot. So my question, what would be your suggestion, considering that you work with this big organization, you have experience? What would be the way to talk to them? What would be the way to build a relationship with them? To get them to investigate my network, investigate what we do, who we are, and potentially partner and bring food into Ukraine.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not part of our field team, so I don't really understand, or I don't have like a clear picture on what the logistics piece of, behind that is. I apologize. Like, hopefully in the future we can get a field team down here and they can go into more of the nitty-gritty details of how they handle logistics. But I think that's always a difficult challenge because there's just that lack of trust and respect that comes from both sides. I'd say you look at it from a Red Cross perspective, there's so much bureaucracy they have to go into in order to go partner with an organization. They're probably looking at some of these small decentralized groups saying, like, I don't know if I can trust whether or not these people are telling the truth. And, if we give them equipment and aid, it's going to go to the places that they're saying they're going to send it to. Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I would just say you'd have to build your reputation up in that area and become a stakeholder. If your own government is advocating for you, then fundamentally that's a very loud voice that they can use to liaison you with different groups of varying sizes. And so you have to go find like a patron of sorts within the country, someone in the government who can say that House of Bread is a recognized organization, they're doing tremendous work, and you investing in them and you partnering with them will ensure that aid and equipment will go to the right place because it's a morally good organization. But that's just my
That's
2 cents. And
yeah,
I'm not a logistics expert.
yeah, that's actually exactly what I did. I do have a letter from inside of Zelensky Circle that includes my personal name and our organization that I'm part of. And I try using that letter with big organizations, and I got nowhere.
Yeah. Again, I apologize. I can't speak on behalf of the Red Cross.
Yeah, but
So
thank you for sharing.
Vlad, what was the pushback that you got out of curiosity, or did you even get any response?
We got one response. We did get 9 semi trucks from Lithuania Red Cross based on that connection, but they gave us garbage, to be honest. Kind of half of the stuff had to be thrown away. They're even worth the gas to bring it inside Ukraine. But the pushback that you get is like, we're already working with somebody, we're already doing something, we already have things figured out. And then when you look how much they bring in, it's literally nothing. It's like when you look on the ground. So, for example, government of Ukraine, Oksana Prodan and Slobozhan Alexander, they met with us begging us for food because they found out about our operations, and met with us and asking, can you help us? And that's government coming to us asking for help. And government does the same thing going to these big organizations. So the pushback we've got is where we're working and we're figuring it out, and that's it. But the funny part is a lot of big organizations, for some reason, they don't even go into Ukraine. Red Cross, they did go in on some level, but not on the level that we were expecting them to go in. So that's kind of the pushback, and it seems like nobody knows who you are and they don't really want to talk to you.
Yeah, it sounds like some internal like politics bureaucracy type thing. Like it goes back to kind of what everyone's been saying around like incentives. But
Yeah, it's
I
unless you know somebody that knows somebody, like personally. Like I did get how I got this 80 semi trucks. It's all through personal connections because of the religious organizations that I've been part of, and I had great connections to Bishop of Germany. I met with him. I flew in. We met. Okay, I have this organization, so I'll give you access to these people. Then Convoy of Hope. Okay, we'll give you access, and we partnered with them. We became their main representative. Then this organization. And it's only unless you really know somebody who can vouch for you, and then they open up their doors.
yeah, it's hopefully we can get some people from some of those larger organizations in here.
It'll be so awesome.
What else have we got today, Anna? Anything? I don't think we can hear you. Hello? Well, for us, while Anna's figuring out her mic issues, um, just wanted to mention that Felix and I have been working on um, putting together, along with Rice Cracker, another community member here who's been helping to write the newsletter updates. We've been working on kind of separating some of the content from what we've been doing at Movement DAO proper, so that Peace DAO can be set up with its own content infrastructure and newsletter, and that can kind of go out to donors, contributors, and people interested in the project in a longer form where we probably need to have a lot of things documented. So we're working through that, and Rice Cracker and Felix Sander are both kind of tag team that.
For that, Stacker. One thing, I think we can talk about this, but we've definitely identified that the impact channel is very valuable at PeaceDAO, just because of the nature of getting updates. So I think one thing that's probably fair to say is any organizations that have received aid or that are just want to share what they're doing, or that have maybe collaborated with other organizations through PeaceDAO, if you can put some information in the impact channel or any kind of info about how that's been going, that would probably go a long way in helping us coordinate and collate some of that information in a longer form newsletter.
Totally. Any updates or testimonials or anything like that, all super helpful. And I think we want to also highlight conversations like this, and the organizations that are joining this and highlighting House of Bread and Spirit of America, and try to make it welcoming for other organizations to come in here and show them that there's value in doing that. And are you back now?
Looks like the microphone is just not engaged. Anna,
Any other questions or thoughts from anyone else?
I will just close by saying thank you all again for having me and hosting this meeting. Really looking forward to moving forward with our cooperation with House of Bread and PeaceDAO. And hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have some good news for y'all regarding our aid handover with House of Bread.
Totally, really appreciate it. And if anyone else from your organization, wants to hop in, feel free to have them join. Always looking to have more people and having different perspectives.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
All right, everyone, will have a great rest of your day.
guys, take care.
See you guys.